Welcome in to another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football YouTube. Today I'm looking at some Dynasty buys. Make sure to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe if you haven't. 60% of viewers still aren't subscribed. Let's change that today. Here's our first player. So, Diontae Johnson. I feel like I talk about this all the time. I talk about how undervalued he is a lot, and I just don't get why his value remains so low. On Keep Trade Cut, he's wide receiver 45, while I have him at wide receiver 38. He's not even that old. He turns 28 this summer. He's not old, but he's already been dismissed. And let's take a look at his journey in the NFL so far. So he's played for 5 years, and we know that he played on the Steelers. Now he's on the Panthers. And overall, he's had a very productive career. In 2019, he had 59 catches, 680 yards, 5 touchdowns, 92 targets. Great rookie year. Then in 2020, he stepped his game up, 88 catches, 923 yards, 7 touchdowns, on 144 targets. Great target earner. And then in 2021, he continued to step forward. It's his best season, 107 catches, 1,161 yards, and 8 touchdowns on 169 targets. More than Garrett Wilson had last year. Then 6.7 catches and 72.6 yards per game. But then it all kind of fell apart after Ben Roethlisberger retired. In 2022, he had no touchdowns. Even though he had 147 targets, he just had 86 catches for 882 yards, but no touchdowns meant he was fantasy irrelevant. And then last year, he was more efficient per catch, but just kind of struggled to get things going. Only had 87 targets, missed some time with injuries, 3.9 catches. But 55.2 yards a game is not bad. Now, he was obviously disgruntled last year, and he was traded to the Panthers this offseason to become Bryce Young's new weapon as his clear wide receiver 1. He's obviously in position to earn a lot of targets, and as I mentioned, he turns 28 in July. The challenges for targets are Xavier Legette, who I do like, but is still a raw, unproven rookie. Adam Thielen, who was washed up by the end of last year, and now is 34, and Jonathan Mingo, who is an obvious bust. So I think that Johnson is clearly the best wide receiver on this team right now. Obviously, the Panthers also made a change at head coach, bringing in Dave Canales, who I think will get the best out of Johnson. Canales was the head coach when they acquired Johnson. So it's obvious that Johnson was in his plans. Now, how to trade for Diontae Johnson in Dynasty. So I've seen some of these trades going on, and then there are, of course, other ways. One that I saw, and actually the trade was Johnson for Shakir, but I thought that was unlikely. So I added a 25 third to Shakir to make it more reasonable. Could you buy Diontae Johnson for Khalil Shakir plus a 25 third? There's still some hype around Shakir. He's a young player with upside who's never earned any targets at all. I would love to buy Diontae Johnson at this price. Then another one, Stephon Diggs or Calvin Ridley. Could you buy Diontae Johnson for those players? Now, you might say, well, those players are very similar to Diontae Johnson, but they're not. Stephon Diggs is 3 years older. Calvin Ridley's almost 2 years older. And if they're not good, their value is 0, whereas Diontae Johnson is at least a little bit younger. And then lastly, I always recommend trading these dead zone running backs. Could you trade DeAndre Swift or Zamir White for Diontae Johnson? I have no confidence in Swift or White to be anything real at all. So I would love to move off of them for Diontae Johnson. Next up, Brock Purdy. Now, Brock Purdy has an interesting dynasty value in that Keep Trade Cut has him quarterback 14. I have him quarterback 14. The issue is not his value among quarterbacks. The issue is that I rate Purdy as a franchise quarterback in Superflex. I'm very confident that he's going to be a quarterback for a long time. But Keep Trade Cut just doesn't. The market doesn't. And that's something important to note is that Keep Trade Cut is not they're not making up these rankings. These are their idea of a measure of what the market says. So the market is saying that Brock Purdy is a tier down in Superflex. I have him 10 overall spots higher among players, higher than running backs and wide receivers in that range. Now, it's important to note, and I think this is something that we lose a little bit with Brock Purdy, is that, well, it's all the scheme, right? It's all the scheme. Any quarterback in the system would succeed. And to a degree, that's true. Quarterbacks in the 49ers system have succeeded. They have succeeded. They've put up fantasy numbers. What they haven't done is be efficient and accurate to the degree that Brock Purdy has. So in 2022, just hopping in off the bench as the quarterback 3 after Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo had their injuries, he came in 67.1% completion. Now, you would say that's really good, right? 8.1 yards per attempt. Really good. That is really good. That's one of the best marks. 13 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Also really good. So it's not just volume. The efficiency is there. Then in 2023, in year 2, after the injury, he came in, started all games outside of the last week where he rested. And he just improved on all of the efficiency. 69.4% completion. One of the best marks in the league. 9.6 yards per attempt. I believe that was the best. 31 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. Again, very good efficiency. Similar to his rookie year in touchdown to interception ratio. And then 4,280 yards is solid, but with room to grow. So there's efficiency, but room to grow on the passing yard volume. Now, another reason people are concerned about Purdy, it's obvious that the 49ers are not going to be able to keep Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel forever. Purdy's under his rookie deal through 2025. He's eligible for an extension next year. They have Kyle Shanahan as the head coach. I do think they can keep all of this together for one more year. They already extended Christian McCaffrey. George Kittle they have under contract. Likely after 2024, Deebo or Ayuk will be gone. I still think it'll be Deebo. Ricky Pearsall will step up. And then they have Jacob Cowing. They can use 2025 rookie picks on someone, or they can sign someone mid-tier in free agency to help their depth. But I'm not worried about the weapons or the scheme long term. But it is important to note that they will have to pay Brock Purdy, and that will reduce the amount of money they have available for offensive weapons. But as you can see on like the Eagles, they have all these offensive weapons and still are paying Jalen Hurts a lot of money. So it is possible to construct such a roster. Now, to trade for Brock Purdy in Superflex, I have 4 suggestions. Number 1, this was straight out of the DLF trade analyzer. Could you buy Brock Purdy for Baker Mayfield and 204? I would easily do that in Superflex. No questions. You're getting a secure quarterback asset for a maybe and just having to pay the 204 to add to it. So that's an easy one. Another one I saw, teammates, Brock Purdy and Brandon Ayuk for Anthony Richardson. I love Anthony Richardson. Don't hear what I'm not saying. I love him. But is the difference between Brock Purdy and Anthony Richardson, Brandon Ayuk in Dynasty? I don't think so. So I would take the Purdy and Ayuk side here. This one's from my Patreon Discord. This one I just kind of came up with as an idea. Brock Purdy and 25 first for Caleb Williams. Again, I love Caleb Williams. Is the difference between him and Brock Purdy at 25 first? I don't think so. I mean, it's possible, but I don't have the difference that much. So I would do this move to buy Brock Purdy. And then lastly, I believe this was also from the DLF Trade Finder. Buy Brock Purdy for 202 and 25 first. For a high-end quarterback in Superflex, this is cheap. This is getting off cheap. So I'm happy to do this. Now, if you like my YouTube content, you should sign up for the Patreon. You get my rankings, access to the Discord, and the ability to ask in advance questions for these YouTube videos, which we'll have at the end. Tiers begin at just $6 a month. And I also have Patreon roster reviews available only for patrons. I've already done 14 of those. So they've been really popular. But you have to get in on the Patreon to sign up for them. And all support goes to allowing me to be an independent voice, independent content where I can say what I want. It's not controlled by corporations or large groups or whatever, editors. But in order to do that, it requires independent support to exist. So I appreciate everyone who supports me. Lastly, I wanted to take a slightly different tack in looking at one more buy, Jermaine Burton, who on Keep Trade Cut has fallen. I don't know if he's fallen to wide receiver 58. I have him wide receiver 51. I think he's falling because T. Higgins has accepted the franchise tag, that he's going to play on the franchise tag. That was always the case. So people who were saying that wasn't the case were not really paying attention. I always thought that was the case. So I like Burton not because I thought T. Higgins was not going to be there this year, but because I like his potential. Now, of course, we have no NFL stats for Burton, but he played 4 years in college, 2 at Georgia, 2 at Alabama. And he never really truly broke out, but he was successful on 2 stacked teams. 20 catches for 404 yards and 3 touchdowns in year 1, 26 catches for 494 yards and 4 touchdowns in year 2. Then he went to Alabama, stepped it up a little, 40 catches for 677 yards and 7 touchdowns. And then last year, really efficient, 39 catches for 798 yards and 8 touchdowns. Never had high volume, but he did flash and he did succeed at 2 big schools. Now, of course, he's on the Bengals, who's picked in the 3rd round. We have T. Higgins on the franchise tag. Jamar Chase is the clear wide receiver 1. Burton is sliding into the Tyler Boyd role. Joe Burrow is the quarterback. We know that Burton was a pretty good prospect. He fell for off-field issues, which, I mean, that can be an issue, but it's not going to affect his play on the actual field. We know that Joe Burrow can support multiple wide receivers. We know that T. Higgins, while he's there this year, is not going to be back in 2025. There's no way. They cannot pay Jamar Chase what he needs to be paid and also an appropriate size contract extension for T. Higgins. That's not possible. And even if it were, I mean, Tyler Boyd was a solid wide receiver 3 for a while. And I think Jermaine Burton is very talented. Even at wide receiver 51, he seems like a value. So I'm kind of in on him. Now, to trade for Jermaine Burton is going to be hard because whoever picked him in the rookie draft likes him. But here are some trades I saw recently. Goodbye, Jermaine Burton, for Jahan Dotson and Michael Mayer. I mean, Jahan Dotson is a bust. Is an obvious bust. And Michael Mayer was replaced 1 year after he was picked by the best tight end prospect in a long time. So for 2 players I do not want at all, I can get 1 player that I do want. So I would absolutely do that. I just made this one up. This was my idea. I don't like Christian Watson, but I don't think a 25-second is enough to account for the upside that Christian Watson has. So if you could get Jermaine Burton combined with a 25-second, I would do that. Get off from Christian Watson, who I really am not optimistic about. And you could get 2 pieces instead of just 1. And then lastly, maybe this is a contender rebuilder trade. Could you get rid of DeAndre Hopkins for Jermaine Burton? I like DeAndre Hopkins as something this year. Not too optimistic, but we're talking about a 32-year-old player. He's never going to carry dynasty value again. He's not on a high-powered offense. I would love to get off of DeAndre Hopkins and on to Jermaine Burton. Now, let's get into those Patreon questions. I have 2 of them. Here's number 1. Any fantasy predictions this year that people will be absolutely shocked about comes to fruition? Now, I'm not a hot take artist. But if you want some things that could actually happen that are far away from ranks, here's a few. Anthony Richardson finishing quarterback 1. I think that's obviously in the range of outcomes, even though it's not where I have him ranked. Travis Kelce, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, these older players being like done. Like really, really done. And finishing way lower than they're being drafted. It's always a risk with those older players. It's why I don't usually get older players. You could put Cooper Kupp on that list as well. And then Jonathan Brooks just being really good, just coming in and being really good. I mean, his ADP for redraft says he's in the 30s for among running backs. So if he came in and just smashed right away, I think that would shock some people. Maybe not the people watching this channel. Lastly, between Pearsall and McConkey, who do you favor as a startable flex week 1? Well, of these 2, it's McConkey. Pearsall is the 5th option week 1 behind Ayuk, Debo, Kittle, and CMC. But I can't imagine that week 1, I'm going to suggest start Ladd McConkey week 1. I can't imagine I'm going to say that. I think I need to see what the Chargers are doing before making a start-sit decision. It's one thing to want to draft McConkey in Dynasty. It's another to draft him in redraft. You can wait a couple of weeks. It's a whole other thing to start him week 1, sight unseen. I don't think McConkey's going to be a top 50 receiver in my week 1 ranking. So the answer is neither. Now, if you liked the video, make sure to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. As always, the best way to support the channel is to subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can be notified about all my exciting content as it drops on the YouTube channel. Of course, if you want my best fantasy football advice, it's available on the Patreon. We have Dynasty, Redraft, Rookie, Start Sit, and more. Every sign-up helps support my independent content. But once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.